Greetings, everyone. My name is James Fallows. In my normal life, I'm a writer for the Atlantic magazine based in DC and around the world, but I am a longtime friend of the Esri company and admirer of the GIS movement, so it's my privilege to be here as your host and MC during this day's Senior Executive Summit. Who has been to Redlands? Everybody should go to Redlands. Redlands is where I am from. Redlands is where Jack is from. Redlands is where Esri is headquartered, not Cambridge, Mass., not Palo Alto, not someplace else, but in Redlands, where it's transformed the town. I've known and respected him for a long time. I believe that my father was, as a small-town physician, was the Dangermond family's doctor back in Redlands. But as I've come to know Jack better over the last decade or two, I really am just excited to be able to hear his presentations and visions for what the technology movement that all of you are part of, and you're all part of the strategic decision making for, what that can mean for companies, for communities, for states, for healthcare workers, and for the world as a whole. So with that, to kick off our Senior Executive Summit, I step away from the stage and I give you the president and founder of Esri, Jack Dangermond. Well done. Thank you.
Yep. Well, I'm not worthy of such an introduction. He's amazing. And he is my dear friend and long-term friend. We went to school, but just a little bit off together, and I followed his work around the world for many years. Jim, thank you very much. And I would like to extend my thanks to each of you for being here. I deeply appreciate you coming and participating in this session. Some of you are my dear friends from around the world, and some of you are brand new here for the first time. So for all of you, I welcome you being here. Jim did a pretty good job of summarizing the purpose of this meeting, but I'd like to review it, not just this meeting, the Executive Summit, but also the entire week. And it is fundamentally just to be together and get to know each other and learn from each other, understand people's patterns for implementing GIS, and fundamentally grow. And we have a long tradition here of actually standing up and introducing yourself to one new person that you've never met before, and then telling them why you're here, and sharing a little bit about yourself. So could you do that right now? Stand up, find somebody new, tell them who you are. It's good. Welcome. As you can see, the people in this room are really rich and full of experiences. And while the presentations will be really fantastic, I understand that, but each of you has a story to tell. And I want you to tell that story. Tell the story of how you're applying or how you're thinking about applying, and connect and build new friendships. That's a large part of this session this morning, but also during the entire week. Because you know that you learn from your friends. I mean, it's not just book learning, it's, my friend told me, and I trust my friend. And then you really make advancements. You know what I mean? It's just a cool thing. So in this GIS community, which now I am starting to call the science of where, which is a kind of expression to describe all the work that all of you and your organizations are doing, in this community, it's not just the technology. There's something about, as Jim mentioned, integration, the integration of knowledge, the power of doing cross-cutting work, the power of holistic approaches, which is unique. GIS in many ways is unique in the sense that it's all about integration. And this is, for me, what the world needs now. My good friend and old friend and dear friend, Richard Saul Wermanhoffen, he's the founder of TED, he's sitting down here in the audience. He often says, understanding precedes action. And ladies and gentlemen, the technology that the science of where is all about understanding. And understanding, bringing science to life, should precede action. And you'll see lots of that, from optimizing in UPS trucks, understanding where to go, delivers action, and saves hundreds of millions of dollars. And we see it in Conservation areas, like the head of the Audubon Society is here, and he brings understanding to his people for conservation purposes. And in BP's case, the whole organization is now fundamentally an operational system running with the science of where. Just gets me excited to be with you and look at your faces. It's just remarkable. Well, Jim asked if I would spend just 2 minutes explaining about Esri, its foundation, its purpose, and how we run it. It's now about 4,000 people, that's one way to describe it, here in the US, and about 6,000 people outside the US. Our main purpose is rooted in making a difference. And the way we do this, the way we're wired, is that we serve our users, helping our users do the work that they do better. It isn't some external notion, but it's helping them integrate their work, think through the relationships of their work, and do their work better. That's sort of the bottom line of it. We are happy to report that we continue to grow and are strong financially. We have a kind of bias or strength, I would call it, of strong quality engineering in our tools, and also tool building with a science focus, thus the name, the science of where. We also are very active in promoting spatial literacy at all levels of education and throughout society. This is sort of our little wired way that we think and as a group have organized, and it's our purpose, basically. We are organized into a group that builds software products. That's maybe our core, from a business perspective, focus. And then we have a group of professional services people who help our customers do their work better. And then other things like education and just a little detail, which is not such a little detail, is that we are not owned outside by venture capitalists or public markets or anything like that. So we actually spend all our money on driving the advancement of GIS and the science of where. So last year we spent about 31% of our revenues on R&D, which is maybe 2 or 3 times more than a normal company. And that has been able to propel us to do what we actually do. And you'll see, especially tomorrow, evidence of that with just new innovations on many, many frontiers. For those of you who are new to this community, I want to just share the kinds of users, actually many of you are represented in this room. We support national government agencies, state, local, businesses, tens of thousands of them, utilities, and also the NGO community, particularly in conservation and humanitarian efforts. We also have about 1,000 teachers here this week, and you'll meet some of them tomorrow, that are driving the science of where in geography and anthropology and in sociology and economics by using these technologies to not only teach about GIS, but teach their particular science within the context. In other words, it's like an instrument within the context of GIS. Well, long story short, my view, where I sit and watch, because I get a chance to see all of our users work, is that GIS is transforming the way people see the world and transforming how they do their work. And over the years, watching the new enthusiasts come in and then they just sort of broaden what they do in their scope and their vision, I can simply say that GIS is transforming the world. And the way it's happening is not like it's changing the whole world as a big vision. No, it's changing each organization one at a time. And in concert, these organizations are starting now, as I'll share particularly tomorrow, connect their systems, collaborate, create common knowledge, and leverage each other's knowledge. This is an extraordinary thing. I can't think of any other technology for me that's more important right now, considering the kind of challenges that you and I, not only at a global level, are facing, but also the effect of everything from climate change to social conflict to not enough resources to overpopulation to loss of nature. These are big issues, ladies and gentlemen. And so how can us little human beings as individuals do something? You know, you listen to the Al Gores of the world, and they're broad and talking about we must do something. What excites me about your work or your organization's work is that it's actually the application of science at the granular level where it can actually matter. You know what I mean? It's not some political vision of it. It's right at the ground level, doing transactions and work. So I'll just share a few examples. These are uses in land use planning and transportation. People are doing renewable energy using the science of where. They're picking the locations for healthcare. They're tracking diseases and getting it in the box, like they did with Ebola, WHO, and now polio. And also in education, teaching kids at a young level how to think spatially, which is, by the way, the evidence is now showing that it improves their whole academic life. I mean, it's remarkable impacts. Users of GIS are using it in utilities for simple things like asset management. That's where they begin. And then they do analytics, and they start to integrate, do all sorts of neat things. It's being used in national security. It's being used in disaster response. It's being used at all scales, from buildings to regions to continents. And at the grandest level, it's being used to look at, monitor, and forecast what's happening on the planet as a whole. This is an animated map of the IPCC model showing the next 100 years or next 80 years of climate change. It's improving efficiency, improving communication, like people see it, and increasingly, as we'll see this afternoon, in real time. And it's improving the kind of decision-making, like don't do this, do it there. So most of you actually know what a GIS is, but Roger, my dear friend, often talked about start, please, with describing exactly what a GIS is. And here's my picture of what it is. It's an information system. It's about data collection and updating the data transactionally, just like any other IT system would be. You know, transactional updates, do something, something changes, it's updated. And today, increasingly, real-time measurement is making GIS come alive with imagery, with sensor networks, and the IoT integration. The outputs of these are, of course, mapping and inquiry and analytics. Your organization's work are increasingly monitoring in real time the complexity of change going on in geography. And they're doing planning, decision-making, and as we'll again see from this afternoon from Dubai, citizen engagement, making citizens involved, part of the system, both contributing and seeing and becoming enlightened. At the technical level, we might say that GIS is a platform, and this is where it gets interesting. Part of it is a platform for record keeping, or people in the IT industry call them systems of record. You follow what I'm talking about here? These are the road changes, the parcel changes, the forest changes, the oil change. You know, they're like transactional updates, systems of record. And they're sort of, in a way, the fundamental piece of a GIS in most organizations. But the power of spatial analysis takes it much further. People are now calling these analytic systems systems of insight. They actually give us the power to analyze relationships and patterns, not only of our own data, but also bringing in external data, like weather or other people's information. That's neat. I can take your data and put it into my system and analyze these things, and we can then have a conversation because it becomes a kind of common language. And the third pattern of GIS is systems of engagement. This is where I have an identity. I'm Jack. That gives me privileges to interact with you and share my data, and you and me through our identities and our groups and our organizational structure, can collaborate. So in summary, these three kind of views of how GIS are all about integrating people and processes and data. And so, as Jim mentioned, it talks about integration. It's using the power of where to integrate virtually everything. So this is an important year, and I'll talk about this at more length tomorrow. But this technology, this instrument, this organizing, integrating instrument is changing. It's almost transforming itself through the integration and leveraging of many things. More measurement, and everybody talks about this. More data, big data. We're measuring virtually everything that moves and changes. And that's at least how I see the world. It's also advancing because of the huge transformations that are occurring in computing. And yes, everybody knows Moore's law, and it's getting faster and faster and smaller and more embedded. But the interesting thing for me is we're taking these big change leaps in things like distributed computing and machine learning to enrich the power of data analytics. And finally, in the GIS space, and I won't spend much time about that today, but I will tomorrow, there's lots and lots of interesting innovations occurring in visualization and spatial relationship building and in dynamic things and handling big data and turning it from big data into big understanding, as again my friend Richard Saul-Wurman often is fond of talking about. This is all expanding the power of GIS. And in a meeting like this, particularly tomorrow, I think it's important that you guys focus on the little things as well as the context. Because I think the little things incrementally evolving along enrich this concept in big ways. The power of GIS is now being realized in a new pattern. Going back here, you'll notice at the top, the upper right-hand corner, that the new pattern is really web and apps, distributed and apps. And I like to call that what's emerging from all of this integration, a web GIS. So while organizations have implemented GIS in lots of different ways, and I'll talk about that more in a second, the new modern pattern of a GIS is a web GIS pattern. It's a kind of architecture. And it's helping everyone do their work better. Individuals, departments, teams, organizations, through using something called web services. Most of you know what web services are. They're serving the data, not just the raw data. It's available to me like dial tone or data services. And in the geospace, it means that I can organize shared knowledge so we can collaborate around these organized shared services, web maps, web layers, web 3Ds, et cetera. And that knowledge, that shared knowledge, helps us in many ways collaborate. And I don't want to go into it in a major way, but collaboration in many ways is the language and the collaboration components in many ways is the thing that's often missing. If you look at your own organization, you know, those guys over in that department, they did it. I mean, I have enough trouble with this in my own organization. You know what I mean? They did it to us. Or if they'd only see it my way. And this language is a visualization language, so seeing, it's an integration seeing language. We can see it our way through this shared knowledge and shared collaborative platform. And so, again, I don't want to pretend that this is some grand thing. It's actually a very practical thing that helps people do their work better. But in concert, I see it in a very grandiose way. It's my own little private, fantasy. That these footprints of great work can be increasingly shared between and among disciplines, between and among organizations, between and individuals, all of it. to improve all of our collective productivity and efficiency. So this WebGIS pattern, let's just start with the enterprise, is expanding the power of individual GIS workers, because they can now share their data as services with their colleagues, knowledge workers, executives, casual, and even the public. But suddenly it turns around because the public can also begin to play. They can contribute crowdsourcing. I mean, what leaders want is input. What citizens want is information. And maps are this perfect way to bring the understanding between the public and organizations, whether you think of it in a personal, in a business way or in a government way. This language now being able to become, ubiquitous. And we saw this with Google Maps, of course. I mean, everybody could become sort of geo-literate. But imagine that they would be full of the knowledge, of the science, of the power of relationship building that now has emerged. And this isn't just public, this is executives, like we now see on the US Hill, as we call it, our legislature. We see active senators and legislators getting active, telling their stories with story maps and connecting. So anyway, I get a little bit carried away about it. WebGIS is a new architectural pattern with services that will propel GIS far beyond our imagination, far beyond what I ever imagined myself personally. Now, this is actually being implemented, and we'll see examples of this by many businesses at the enterprise level. It's being implemented by many government agencies, from little towns like the city of Rancho Cucamonga all the way up to the UN, as a foundation for their global sustainability goals program. By big agencies like NOAA, by small departments in a county. They're sharing their information, they're organizing their information, and we'll see this again repeatedly this morning and today and tomorrow. Now, underneath this WebGIS pattern, this notion of sharing can connect individuals to organizations. It sort of breaks down the barriers. I've already said this. And then between organizations and other organizations. The city of Las Vegas Water Agency used to hold their water lines quite secret because they didn't want anybody to know. This is their own information. Now they've shared it with the city and with the electricity company, because the electricity company kept drilling in the road and, breaking water lines. So they now started sharing back and forth. They have kind of a smart approach between different separate institutions. I think through, and you'll see evidence of this tomorrow, repetitive organization sharing through the web services mold, this will take off and create a kind of network of sharing. The good guys, the bad guys, the engineers or the planners, the environmentalists or the oil people, suddenly they start to share and understand what's going on and collaborate in whole new ways. So I just love that idea. And that is the core idea of the GIS revolution that will happen. GIS integrates now real-time data. We hear a lot about the IoT as a way to feed information in. Our cities are complex. They're rich ecologies of all sorts of interactions going, and so is nature. So being able to read in the built environment and read in the natural environment through sensor networks and synoptic sensing, we can now have, instead of these old geology maps who never change, no, we read them into a real-time environment which we can really leverage. And again, this is Dubai's vision for a smart Dubai. GIS now supports new tools for cartography and spatial analytics. They're interactive and they're dynamic and they're leveraging computing. We call them smart mapping tools. And they help normal people be able to make beautiful maps like these in 2D and in 3D. GIS supports spatial analysis tools, and These are long and old and rooted in the core of GIS for sure. But now these are opening up with new open APIs, the ability to use JavaScript and also use Python and Python notebooks, the sort of lingo of the data science community to access these and script them together, pull different departmental information together, and do data analytics in whole new ways. Also, GIS is moving to the more interactive mode. Some people call this location analytics. Roger called it kind of low-level GIS. But it's fine, it's a new term. And it's taking off in the business community for doing exploratory interactions with data. It's doing things like geocoding of normal tabular business data. It's integrating normal tabular business data with these layers of content about demographics and the environment, geo-enriching normal business information, and being used in all kinds of decision support environments. While it's not talked about this way very often, I'm going to talk about it this morning. GIS is now matured, has integrated image processing and management tools in such a way that it's a complete imagery platform. It can now read virtually any image typed from satellites. People like Digital Globe do synoptic and fantastic observations, to aerial data, to drones, all the way down now to Planet Labs. Every day they take a picture of the whole world. Just read all that in and process it dynamically as it's being dropped into large reservoirs of content, processed into meaningful information products that are immediately available. Wow, so it's not just sensor networks, it's synoptic measurement at the same time. GIS is extending into the field. It's automating the collection of data in such a way that you observe or you collect statistical data or feature data, and as you're collecting it, it's going into a big database in the sky that other people can look at in the enterprise and know where you're at and what you're doing. It's automating navigation. We can track things. And this year, we've introduced a new version of a tool called ArcGIS Explorer, which allows you to go in the field and mark up. And people in the enterprise are seeing the markups of what's happening. And the whole notion here is to bring this, our field workforce, into sync with the enterprise operations. Well, the field apps are quite extraordinary, but the app revolution has opened up GIS so that everybody in the organization could look at this content that a few people used in the past or worked with. You follow this power? This is so neat. The idea that everybody can have access if they have the right identity name. Not everybody, but everybody who you choose can not only be enriched, but also can be contributing to the enterprise. And this lays the foundation for what I see as the next big step in GIS implementation, which is this idea of a hub, the idea of getting all the citizens in a city or an organization to participate in the GIS of, say, the city or the county. They can provide leadership with what people want, and they can provide the citizens with the information that's important for them to know. You know, how are we doing in paving in my street? Is it all going to where the rich people live, or are we paving the areas in a democratic way? You know, are we putting the cops where the crime is, or are we just putting them over there to protect a few? All of those city functions can be opened up and made available and seen by normal people. In a way, it's not just open data. I mean, open data is interesting, and a few geeks can take the data and do something with it. But I'm talking about open services, so people at all levels can actually see their community in action and participate. This excites me, and you'll see this tomorrow in a form of technology that's really interesting. I'm going to conclude just with 2 or 3 minutes about Esri's work. We continue to advance this science of where with technology. That's our main mission. That's how we do it. And it's largely assembled around ArcGIS, the technology that does all of these various things. It's a complete, we say it's a complete and integrated platform. And for us, we take that very seriously. It isn't just some components of functionality thrown together to support one function at a time. No, it's a complete integrated system with servers and desktops and apps that all work. I mean, how many of you here have a smartphone? Really? You're not raising your hands. Come on, give me a break. You're supposed to be, this is my prop. I have an iPhone. I have no bias about Apple. All the other ones are fine too. But what is amazing about the iPhone is that it's connected to the iCloud. It has iMusic. Okay? It's all these components that, you don't just buy a phone, you buy a complete system. And it works, and it's integrated. So our ambition, our aspiration has been to create an integrated system, not just components. That's open. This one isn't so open. Ours is open. Sorry. No. Open and services-based and distributed, so it can connect all of this information together. It's deployable in your own computer and also in the cloud, or various combinations, and also SaaS. That's our big deal. It's a system that organizes and manages, technically, all aspects of a GIS. And what I mean by that is the data, of course, that's obvious, but also the products that are generated from the data, like web maps and web layers and web scenes, and also apps. The system manages the apps and their distribution, and models and analytics. It's all integrated. It manages all of those. And then the people through identities, and then organizations through groups, just like you would have with other systems of engagement in social media. And this is delivered through something we call Portal, which is an integrated user experience for organizing and managing all of this. And this has been emerging. We haven't been able to do this ever. We've dreamt about it, but it's emerging because of the web GIS nature of what we have. This pattern can be implemented in a lot of ways. Millions of desktop users, hundreds of thousands of servers. But now this new web pattern that I've been describing with web maps and devices has really taken off. And that is the platform for this notion of a system of systems, kind of interconnecting systems, sharing services like in Las Vegas or hundreds of other places, interconnecting individual systems and empowering each other through open services platforms. And the heart of that, and we'll spend quite a bit of time on this tomorrow, is a technology called RTS Enterprise, which is new. It's actually new. Happened just at the beginning of this year. And it's our next generation server platform. It has this portal for organizing all the knowledge. It has strong GIS services, but it's also modular with other independently specialized services that can be deployed on many machines in a distributed architecture. Now, for some of you, you'll just say, it's too much garble. Look, this is revolutionary from my perspective and my entire experience in life. I've never really imagined that we could do this. But this means, for example, that we can have dozens of independent servers doing specialized things, some of on-prem, some in the cloud. And we can scale it out to 100 servers or 1,000 servers. Or some of our users have scaled it out to 5,000 servers, different devices that are just scaled up to handle some of the massive kinds of problems that are being encountered. So in other words, taking GIS to scale. And ladies and gentlemen, that's one of my messages. That's why I'm so excited this year, is I now see that we're going to be able to take this amazing integrative technology to scale. And it will be done openly. open and interoperable with all kinds of other technology. And the evidence of this that we've been able to do it are the thousands of systems that are already operating in complex, heterogeneous environments. So we're not simply saying this is a specialized system. No, it has to interoperate with everything in the IT infrastructure. Well, I'm so surprised that Jim hasn't come up here and grabbed me away. I'll just conclude with one slide. First, let me again say thank you for the privilege of having time with you. I'll end this conversation by saying implementing GIS requires so much more than the technology. I'm deep in the woods in technology, as you can tell, and I can see how advances of the technology is going to mean all of these things. But it's far from the actual answer. It requires much more. It requires people like yourself inside of national agencies, inside of utilities, inside of business, and inside of NGOs, having a vision of how this can actually transform and advance the work. It requires fundamentally not just being enamored by the technology, but what's the business case? And you guys, especially you, know exactly what I mean. It's not about just the vision or nicey-nicey or making pretty maps. It's about, I can save money. I can make better decisions. I can drive efficiency. I can consider science of everything in my thinking. These are business cases. And then people that can articulate that, they understand the value, they can sell it inside of institutions. You know what I mean? That's not so easy. And there's all kinds of obstacles, and humans are just wired into different ways of doing things. It requires ongoing governance, and it requires great people, and this vision and culture also of collaborating and sharing and engagement. So, Jim, thank you for not throwing me off. I'll stop here. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'll see you later.